Welcome, new and old friends. I just have a couple things to say, and then the stories will begin. Before you drift off into the dream realm, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. If you'd like to find out about my social links, my website, how to help the channel, check the description box. Now turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. It's time to dream. Time Glitch in Washington State by sunnerth. I posted this a few months ago, but I'm a Reddit rookie, new account, so I needed some karma per the subreddit rules. Drove through a town stuck in the past. Okay, so this happened in April 2023. My mom and I were on a road trip in another state, driving on a state highway north of the major interstate, probably 60 or so miles. We wanted a better experience than the typical highway driving, so it was a great scenic route. We were driving through vast swamps of farmland and small communities spread out every 45 to 60 minutes of the drive. So we're out there, if you will, hours away from the nearest big city. It was absolutely beautiful, by the way. I was in the passenger seat, just enjoying the scenery. About 3/4 of the way to the destination, the speed dropped to 25 and the road took a hard bent left turn into a small town. Unlike the other towns, where you could see them on the approach, slow down, and drive through them, this one came up abruptly, and it kind of felt like the highway just dumped us into this town. It was very, very tiny, maybe 3 blocks total, and we were out. But what we saw was crazy. 50s themed diner, old gas station with that traditional pumps, a Wild West themed general store, and the craziest part, there were a handful of classic cars from the 40s and 50s that all appeared to be in great condition. It looked like they were just parked. There weren't any car shows or people walking around viewing them. My mom wanted to stop and get some coffee, but something in my gut was off, and I said, hell no, this place is freaky. She then made a comment that it felt like the place was right out of the 50s and they kept the theme going. To me, it was giving major sundown town vibes, or something. I couldn't place my finger on it. Something was weird. It took all of 25 seconds to drive through and back to a faster speed limit, and we were off. We wrapped the vacation up a few days later, and that was that. I've recalled that experience quite a few times these past few months, and finally last night I wanted to look into this place. I traced our route on the Google Maps, and after searching for quite a bit, eventually found it and checked it out on Street View. Much to my surprise, this Street View looked nothing like my memory. The general store was different, the diner was different, and the damn gas station that was a cool retro pumps? Gone, and in place was an RV storage with a few tiny campers. The image date was from after our trip. Perfect, they changed it. No issue, I'll check on a picture for 2022, before our trip. Much to my utter horror, the only thing different in the older image were the campers. I asked my mom about it today, and she explained the town exactly as I remembered it, then also brought up how I made a comment about feeling uneasy and how she wished we stopped anyways. Well, I showed her the Street View images, and she got freaked out too. And yes, the town on Google Maps is the same one we drove through. There aren't any other places on the road that cut hard left. I'm 100% certain, and my mom was able to zoom in and eventually find it herself. Yes, I literally asked her to do that for my own sanity, because this is freaky. I've been looking through other experiences but can't find anything similar to this. Has anyone heard or experienced firsthand anything like it? My heart sank when I read the text, "They are coming," followed by my info. I quickly awoke my captor lying next to me, letting him know we'd have to prepare for a final stand against the police. Did I Slip to Another World? By Real Tension 7442. I was at school when a girl I barely knew approached me and started talking in an overly familiar manner. I didn't question it, as I realized that she was hitting on me, but eventually she said that she missed hanging out with me and Ryan. Ryan was a friend of mine, but not the kind of friend who I hung out with, and I certainly had never hung out with this girl. She was a year below me, so I didn't know her from any lessons or whatever. So as not to sound rude, I went along with it as she recounted all the dinner breaks we had spent as a trio. Again, this simply didn't happen. Long story short, we ended up in a short relationship, but we're not compatible and parted ways. During this relationship, I did decide to ask her if retaining to know me was her way of flirting. She got quite offended at this. 2 years later, I'm walking down the street and a girl stops me and is over the moon to see me. I have no clue who this is, but she knows my name, and to be polite, I asked her how she's been and all that. She says that we have to catch up sometime and that I should add her on Facebook. A couple weeks later, I see her again and she asked me why I hadn't added her on Facebook. I played it cool, asking why she didn't add me. It's because she couldn't find me, which does actually make sense as I took my stepdad's name earlier that year. So I took a gamble and said that I couldn't spell her name, hoping that it wasn't Kim Smith or something. Luckily, it was hard to spell, so she writes it down. We meet up and she starts reminiscing of the times we spent together. And just like the first girl I mentioned, we were apparently a trio with another minor friend. I asked this friend, Haley, about her, and she confirmed that they were inseparable friends and found it hilarious that I couldn't remember her. But I always considered Haley to be a loner, so that surprised me. In conclusion, I've had 2 girls both claiming we were close friends, and I remember neither. Is this a strange way of hitting on someone, or have I slipped realities? It's worth noting that I'm introverted, so I don't know how I seem to have made such an impression on these strangers, and I'm quite the loner. I'm unlikely to forget people who were friendly towards me. I also want to point out that I am not a believer in glitches. Love to read them, but mainly to ponder how they could be real. As an additional bit of information, I share no common interest with either girl. They only seemed interested because of my apparent bond we formed. Once we started speaking for, in my mind, the first time, they quickly grew bored and became strangers once again. In case it's asked, neither girl knew anything too personal about me. Although the second one did casually mention that my mom and her dad worked together. I don't know how she knew that, but I got her dad's name and confirmed with my mom that he was a colleague of hers. Yesterday, history was made when we detected a radio signal from an intelligent species in a distant galaxy. This morning, a decoded and translated signal from 100 million light years closer appeared on the computer monitor that said, "We're coming." I've never been able to explain it. By J.B. Blitz 9. Years and years ago, when I was still but a teenager, living in a small home with my parents and younger brother, in around 2009 to 2010, it was the early morning. Having woken up about an hour earlier, my mom was telling me about how I was to take my younger brother to school later that day as she couldn't make it. Dad had already gone to work. Standing in the living room on the creaky floor, I see my brother descending the stairs to my left. It's one of those staircases where you can see just about the full flight with small wooden pillars lining the length of it. The gaps between those providing a clear view of those who was going up and down them. So my brother descends the stairs. Dull blue PJ bottoms that are slightly too big. PJ top of the same matching color. I see his tuft of dark brown hair and his excited skips in his way down the stairs. I hear the loud creaks of each step down the flight. I could swear I heard slight intake of air and hushed giggling. My brother back then was the excitable sort. He would sprint from place to place, bounce into things and people in his wake. Still true to a certain extent. So he comes bouncing down the stairs and reaches the living room floor. The floorboard creaks and now he's out of my sight. My eyes still mostly engaged in speaking with my mom. He rushes from my left around behind me. I feel the slight displacement of wind as he rushes past, a quick move as to not have him bump into me. I step forward to do this. Sorry, Jay. I look to my right, expecting him to be there. Nothing. Not a soul. He was still upstairs, sleeping heavily. I turned to my mom, who had since turned away and walked into the kitchen. She saw my confusion. I spoke to her about it. She looked frightened. She has always been easy to fright. We don't speak often of it, but from time to time it comes up on a topic of spirits and stuff. I'm not a believer generally, but nothing has felt quite like that. My mind plays games with me, making me hear and see things that were not there, or maybe they were. Because I could swear I saw him. I swear I heard him. Nowadays, I say it was out of the corner of my eye. But it was much more of a glance than that, and I simply haven't had the heart to admit it out loud. I try and explain away, and often do without telling the full story. But with all these details, I cannot. But I wasn't tired. I had been up for a while and had had a decent night's sleep before. I wasn't ill. I highly doubt the monoxide out, and I've never seen anything like this before or after. It just bugs me, and I can't reason with it. It's not even the biggest occurrence in the world, far from it. But I'm just at a loss. Seeing that my baby had already fallen asleep in my arms, I decided to also take a nap as soon as I finished putting all the frozen food I bought into the freezer. When I woke up, I realized that being a single mother had taken too much of a toll on my sleep schedule, as the water from the thawing bag of frozen fries dripped down my arm and chest. Lost an Hour by Legal Opportunity 851. Another post on the sub reminded me of my own experience losing an hour unexplained. I appreciate if anyone could make some sense of this for me. I was at work on a university campus. One of my consultants wanted to check in with me on a project over coffee. So I met him at a local coffee shop that was 2 buildings over from where I work. I met up with him at 11 a.m. Because I had a 12 p.m. appointment with a supplier, I sent a reminder on my phone for 11:45 a.m. and 11:55 a.m. so I could wrap up the conversation with the consultant in time for my 12 p.m. meeting. It's a coffee shop, so there wasn't any alcohol involved. I remember having a tea that I normally have, and I don't think I ordered any food. The consultant is a good friend. I've worked with him at other companies. He was stopping by, off the clock, to discuss recent trends in the higher education space to add to an article he was writing. Common practice in his industry. So my alarm goes off at 11:45 a.m. and 11:55 a.m., and we say our goodbyes. I walk back to my office, which is literally half a block at best from the coffee shop. I take the stairs up to my office, and I'm immediately greeted by the receptionist inquiring to where I was. She further explains that my suppliers showed up on time, waited 15 to 20 minutes for me to arrive, then left in frustration. I remember looking at the clock on the TV screen at the entrance and seeing that it was 12:59 p.m. I then ran to my office and looked at my PC. It was 1 p.m. It was so surreal to lose an hour and have no idea how it happened. I don't feel lightheaded or compromised in any way. I was in a public setting the entire time. My phone was reading the correct time when I double-checked it afterwards. I ended up having to write a lengthy apology to the supplier. I meant to ask the consultant how much time we spoke for, but wasn't sure how to bring it up without sounding crazy, given that he was a professional contact. I didn't want to create any weird vibes. Any ideas? That sounds like your anxiety talking. I'm sure your friends don't really hate you. My last therapy session plays back in my head as I tread water 6 miles off the coast of Florida. The sound of laughter and a motor fading in the distance. Someone I knew died twice in 2 different ways, and it was in the newspapers. By wildberryquilting. I went to high school in a very small, one-stoplight sort of town. A few years after school, I was catching up with an old friend, and she told me how these 2 boys that we both knew pretty well had passed away. We will call them Josh and Sean. I asked what happened, and she sent me a news article about how they were working in a shop and an air compressor had exploded and killed them both. Fast forward a few years later, and somehow it came up in a conversation I was having with my dad. I decided to try to find the news article I had previously read about it. Instead, I found an article about how Josh had been shot by people who broke into his house looking for drugs. There was actually a lot of details in the article about the incident, and it was an unsolved crime. There was no mention of Sean at all, and I couldn't find any article about anything happening to him. I don't have any connections any longer to anyone in the town, so I can't check to see if anyone else remembers it the original way. It's just crazy because I remember vividly reading both articles. I know for a fact it wasn't just someone with the same name for 2 reasons. First, he has a very unusual last name, and it was a very small town. Second, there were actually pictures of him provided in both articles, and it was 100% the kid I knew from school. Another strange twist is that I looked up the story again just now to see if there was anything new. It seems the case was solved and 4 or 5 people went to prison for it. The second story has also now been featured in an episode of a TV series that I never heard of. I'm considering trying to track it down so I can watch it. Went to the hospital to stop seeing the little girl everyone else can't see. When the medicine took effect, all I could do was act like my family and hospital staff were still there to trick her. A Parcel That Was Never There by Spidemman. What I'm about to share just happened a few minutes before writing this post, and I swear to God this is true. I was told to pick up a parcel in our apartment mailbox before going home. As I was about to pick up the parcel, our mailbox did not contain anything other than an envelope for our electric bill. After getting the bill, I put my hand inside the box to thoroughly check if I missed it because the parcel was so small. After confirming there was nothing inside the mailbox, I then proceeded to call my girlfriend to tell her that the parcel was not left in the mailbox. I then talked to the security on duty to confirm if there was a parcel left under our name, and he told me to just double check. So I did, and when I got back, the parcel was there, right by the door of the mailbox. And it's not a small parcel, it's a plastic t-shirt, which would not have been missed by my hand while checking the first time. After that, I got goosebumps and realized it was very weird for that to have happened. 1. Nobody might have put it back since I was just a few feet away from the mailbox. 2. The mailbox is 5 inches tall and wide, which by touch to the back wall means you've reached everything there is to reach. And 3, the gosh darn item is fitted in there that you need exert a little bit of pull force to even get it out. If anyone's experienced the same, please share, cause I'm thinking of supernatural occurrences aside from it being a glitch in the Matrix. Knowing that my abuser would eventually kill me the moment I was trapped with them, I planned to silently ask for help the last chance I got. But as I saw our guests and my soon-to-be wife joking about the wedding topper, a groom being dragged by the bride, I realized no one would take me seriously. Classic Object Doubling Story by Qrosz178. This story isn't anything crazy, but it's always confused me. So I help out at a summer camp, and last year I was actually given the responsibility to do a little research project with the kids. Long story short, it involved each team of kids having a whiteboard to write their findings during the project down and present at the end. Rather than purchasing 5 whiteboards, I opted to get some large sheets of cardstock laminated so they'd be able to be used with a dry erase marker. I don't have pictures or receipts, but the amount of things I witnessed to confirm what I did in preparation for the project and how nothing was amiss till the day of the project is weird. So I originally got the idea for cheap whiteboards when I saw a pack of 5 big sheets of white cardstock at the store for a few dollars and was like, perfect, I'll do 5 teams. Took the package to the print shop to get them laminated. I bought 5. I said I wanted 5 laminated. They laminated 5, so no problem or comment on a miscount. And I paid for 5 laminations. Brought them out to my car and counted them. 5. Months later, after spending all that time setting up for the project for them, 5 envelopes of clippings of info on 5 ancient tablets, each put with a whiteboard to give to the 5 teams. I spent so much time around these 5 laminated sheets. So obviously when I handed out the pack of tools to each of the teams and found that I had 6 whiteboards, I was so confused. I ran around the room trying to find what team was missing their whiteboard, but each one had already. All 6 were the same, even all that had the cuts on the corner where I rounded the sharp plastic out with scissors so they wouldn't poke any of the kids. The worst scene I ever saw working for the FBI was a small family tortured to death. The worst scene I ever saw for CBS was where a deranged father tried turning his $3 into a set of Russian nesting dolls. Missing Purse by Black Eyes. I have many stories like this, but today was the oddest one. After therapy, I was picked up and taken to a cafe, where I stayed until my roommate got off work. I picked up my purse, my stream deck, and moved out to the car. I said my goodbyes and placed my purse on top of the car before I left, and then took it and placed it in the car by my feet. I remember the familiar jangle of the keychain on it and the weight of my purse on my shoulder. But when we got home, my purse was nowhere to be seen. I looked in the back seat and under the front seat, but it wasn't there. So we drove back to the cafe, where my other roommate had put it behind the counter, claiming I left it on the chair for the table I was at. Me. Oh, I could have sworn I grabbed my purse. Thank you for putting it in the back here, though. Roommate A. I could have sworn you did too, but I saw it and thought I'd bring it home for you. Me. Today has just been odd, I guess. Roommate A. What do you mean? I then go on to explain a bit and say thank you again and return to the car. My other roommate and I believe in quantum immortality and the like, thinking our consciousness keeps switching to different dimensions. We joked about how the cafe might have been blown up or something, but to be safe, we took the back roads home. Let's see, Grandma should have a comma in it. Otherwise, people will think you want to eat me, Graham explained. Then she reminded me not to tell my parents where Grandpa went or what she had been feeding me while they were on vacation. Elevator Guy by Overhopeful. This happened a few years back at my college dorm. Roommate and I, both around the age of 19 probably, were coming back to the dorms after dark. It's one of those buildings where you have to scan your university ID card to get in, unless someone from the inside lets you in. There's no other way. We walk up to the building and see someone maybe 10 feet ahead of us scan their card and go inside. The key here is that he just was far enough ahead of us to where as soon as he goes inside and the door shuts itself, we are there scanning our IDs to open the door for ourselves. Once inside the lobby area, there is one elevator on either side. These elevators are maybe just around 10 feet from the entrance door where we had just walked in. As we walk inside the building, we see the person who went in before us walk inside the elevator and the door shuts just as we approach it. The same elevator he just got into. I press the button and to my surprise, the door opens instantly. Like, instantly. As soon as the doors closed, they were opening again, except this time there was nobody inside. I hesitated, but walked into the elevator and pushed my floor button. The energy between me and my roommate felt tense, and I didn't say anything as I was trying to rationalize what I just saw in my brain. My roommate spoke up first, saying, "Did you see that guy?" and verified that I wasn't the only one who had seen it. We continued trying to come up with some kind of explanation and came to nothing. Even if the elevator guy only went up one floor, there was nowhere near enough time for the elevator to go up and come back down in time. Again, the doors closed with him inside mere seconds before they reopened after I pushed the button. Never experienced something like this since then. Still spooks me. My dog has come to me for food every night since I got him a week ago. I'm not sure what will happen when I run out of limbs, but I'm almost out of fingers and all I can do is hope it will be quick. Random Guy's personal info appears in Jeep by FreshShelves. First post on this sub. This past summer, my mother works from home, so doesn't go out much. Decided to turn in her lease early on her 24 Jeep Wrangler. Important to note, she's the first owner to get it with 3 miles. She never really went out other than shopping, and when she did, she would go with my stepfather. She figured herself and him could just share one car. So myself, mother, and stepfather took a day on the weekend to completely deep clean her Jeep before returning it to the dealership. It should be noted as well, my mother was very meticulous with keeping the car clean, so it was clean inside and out frequently. While cleaning, my stepfather pulls an envelope from under the passenger rear seat. It was thick like a book and sealed shut. Originally, I thought it was possibly the paperwork that came with the Jeep when she got it. When we opened it, it was all the information about a gentleman who lived 2 states over from us. And it wasn't just this guy's name or picture. It was sensitive info, like really private. Inside this envelope was a job application for a local police department, some copies of criminal records. He wasn't the best driver, apparently. And all of his information, including social security, legal copy of his birth certificate with the stamp, all his high school and college transcripts, and a legal copy of his license, as well as a letter to the chief of police. The thing that was more strange was that this information was dated back to 2014, almost a decade ago from when we found it. We managed to track down the guy through Facebook miraculously and got in touch with his wife. She stated that he hasn't been in law enforcement in years and has a totally new career. We asked if he worked in auto mechanics, to which she said no, and he had never even been to our state. Both my parents and I, as well as his wife, were completely stumped and couldn't find out how basically this guy's entire life info from a decade ago got into the back of a 2024 Jeep. Curious to know what others may think. My wife squeezed my hand with tears in her eyes as the revolutionary device began to display our comatose daughter's first communication in years. I remember everything, the text kept repeating. My wife cried with delight, but my heart sank as I realized I'd have to kill her. The Man in the Hat, Shadow People Being Something Else by RaffyHighStrangeness. Hi everyone. I'm sharing another story with the Reddit community. This one still makes me think and is one of my more persistent experiences that I've had. Please let me know what you all think. The Man in the Hat. This is one of my earliest memories. If I had been alone when it happened, I would have not been confident enough to share it. This occurred when I was a young boy. My older brother was with me. We lived in Mexico City. We were born there. This event happened sometime after the 8.0 magnitude earthquake of 1985. This violent earthquake led to the deaths of over 5,000 people and several $7 billion worth of damage. This earthquake, its intensity and wild destruction is my earliest memory. At the time, we lived in an apartment building several stories up. The structure was just your run-of-the-mill housing unit commonly constructed out of concrete, brick, and wood. I recall how, upon entering the unit, the dining area would be immediately to your right, the kitchen to the left. If you head further inwards, there was a trellis where my mom kept her plants and my dad kept his dog. Beyond this area, the kids' room would be to your left, my parents' room to the right. In between these two rooms was a living room with several windows looking out onto the street. Our unit was located at the corner of the building. This happened sometime around noon. My brother and I were playing in the living room with our toy cars on the windowsill. Our mom had just come from watering her plants and had gone into her room. My dad was out. I recall looking onto the street, seeing several cars and people moving about. If I remember correctly, we were trying to recreate as accurately as possible the goings-on of the world below with our toys. We were situated near the corner of the window, my brother to my right, closest to the wall, when something strange caught my attention. A set of sturdy, unusually pale hands with long, dirty, claw-like nails were piercing the brick exterior of the building. Then a circular, flat, soot-covered black object came into view. This object appeared to be swaying from side to side with each climb. The flattened object slowly became elongated, tall, fanning out at the base, a hat. Gradually, and much to my confusion, I began to make out the features of a man, except that it didn't look like any man I had ever seen. Paled face, long hair, with intense dark eyes. His face is the kind of thing you never forget. I bumped my brother with my elbow, his attention still diverted by the toy cars in his hand. His view partly obstructed by the wall. "Look," I remember saying to him. My brother looked up, his toy still in hand, and a silence overtook the both of us. Expressionless, his gaze somewhere far away, the man stopped his ascent, then turned and looked directly at us. Still holding on to the facade of the building, his plaited face suddenly turned into a hollow grimace of a smile. His teeth were sharp, fanged with a yellowish hue. His eyes glowed with an intensity that seemed out of place for something that was already out of place. Suddenly the man brought one of his hands to his still outstretched smile, and with it signaling us to shh. Frozen in place, we stood there and watched him resume his climb. As he scaled the building, we noticed just how tall he was. He was immense, taller than most people you encounter on any given day in this city. We also saw that he wore what looked like a 3 or 4-piece black suit and a long coat. Quite distinctively, it was hard to ignore that he looked to be like he was covered in smoke. Despite his warning, we ran and excitedly tried to get our mom to come with us to see the smoke-covered man. She hurried alongside us, opening the window and looking out and up. If his goal was to climb to the top of the building, who the hell knew what he was doing there in the first place? He still had several stories to go, yet no one was there. She called out to the street and shouted if anyone had seen anything. No were the only answers from below. There was no immediate recall of what occurred following this event, only that life felt a bit strange, as if the person was something that we weren't meant to see. It was like being a child and thinking that you would be in trouble if you snuck up on Santa Christmas morning when you should be asleep, except that there had been an air of danger that my younger self felt was better left alone. Several years later, we moved to another apartment in the city before eventually making it out to the United States, where a better life awaited us. Sometime around 1997, we were all having dinner at our new house. We were still keeping the dinner hours we had been accompanied to in Mexico. So around 9 p.m., we all gathered at the table. We were having a pretty good time, smiling and carrying on, when my older brother abruptly stopped laughing halfway through a joke. I thought he was choking, so I turned to look at him. He was ghostly pale, his eyes and mouth wide open. He lifts his hand and points directly to the living room beyond where the dining area and kitchen are. We all turn, now staring into the dimly lit darkness of the living room. I asked him what's wrong. He says, "There's a really tall person standing there looking at us." "What does he look like?" I asked. His voice, quieter than usual, shakingly replied, "He's wearing a tall hat and a really long coat." I remember feeling like time stopped, immediately thinking of the man we had seen several years before scaling the side of the building we used to live in. It couldn't possibly be the same person. "What does his face look like?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "It's all black, like a shadow." Thank you to everyone listening and reading. Again, please let me know what you think. It wasn't until I seriously started browsing forums in the late 2000s that I began to realize that these kind of entities may be more common than I thought. Still, as the series goes on, which you can find at my Substack, I'll share what I really think may be going on here. I'll have that link in the description box / show notes for you guys. Every time I kill a priest, I tell them the same thing. Ask God to heal my daughter, or I'll keep sending messengers. Emotional Attachment by PlayingBobcat4805. This happened to me when I was about 13. I was with my native side of the family and learning about the spiritual paths of the family, when I felt this major gut feeling. We were outside on the back patio, and it was getting pretty dark as we were out there for a while. I could feel something standing on the other side of the fence behind where I was sitting. The feeling got worse to the point I started feeling nauseous. Out of nowhere, generally within a split second, I started sobbing, like scream crying. I've always pictured the spirit as a woman. It felt like a woman's pain and yearning. I don't know why. It just always been what was shown to me. I was a little on edge beforehand, but not nearly to the point of bursting out in painful emotion like that, especially in front of people with no trigger. I had no idea what was happening. They brought me inside. I was with my 34 or so year old cousin, and gave me one of my late aunt's old stuffed animals. The second I held it, I stopped. I've always had a very strong connection to her, and I hadn't even known it was hers until afterwards. When they gave it to me, I even thought, really, a stuffed animal? I've always been sensitive to energy, especially as a child, but that's the most that's ever attached to me, by far. They, my cousin, had talked about it with me, and they had told me they felt it outside the fence too, before I even told them I felt something there. They just didn't want to scare me. Later they told me they had a salt ring around the property, which would make sense as to why I felt it directly on the other side of the fence rather than any closer. They had explained to me that empaths are like a bright light shining in a dark space. It draws things to you, and when a spirit with that much hurt, that much emotion, and no way to express it in the physical realm, they can pass it on to you. I've never found anything to explain it, but I also know what I felt, and there were too many confirmations that it wasn't just in my head. The Ifrit cackled, vowing to kill all those who cared for me before the sun rose again. I awoke to find my wife and kids eating breakfast downstairs, but my dog had stopped breathing. I already see too much, but this Shadow Man encounter felt insane. By SageHedgeHag. Since I was a kid, I've seen some really dark entities, but I often come back to the specific one that happened less than a year ago. I had first moved to Portland from Minneapolis in November of 2022, and this incident happened late winter/early spring of 2023. At the time, I was living with my aunt, and it was around 1 a.m. in the morning. Everyone was in bed, and I was in the living room playing the new Hogwarts Legacy. All lights turned off except for the cast of the TV when all of a sudden, I got a violent chill on my spine and every hair on my body stands straight up. I immediately break into a cold sweat, and I imagine this is what prey feels like when something has locked on. My eyes immediately go towards the dark kitchen hallway, and I see long, dark fingers wrapping around the corner, and my breath stops watching this happen in slow motion. I know what comes next, and see a head pop around the corner shortly after I make out the hand. I'm staring into complete black face of darkness, and I know it's staring straight at me. But as soon as it looked around the corner, it went back not to be seen again. I'm shaking at this point, but I feel like it was looking for someone specific and not finding them. Like I wasn't who they were hoping to encounter? I don't know. Granted, at this time, I was living with people who unfortunately stay within stagnant negative energy, and I cleansed myself as much as possible and tried not to engage in their constant BS. This isn't the first time I've seen shadow people, but this is the first time I looked one in the face, and I absolutely do not recommend. The worst part of the outbreak wasn't watching many of my relatives, my friends, or even my wife die. It was that the fungus didn't block the connection between my brain and my taste buds. We used to play a supernatural paper game that gave us answers, by Anonymoose. I studied in an Asian country. This is important as it has to do with the Asian culture or not. I'm not very sure anymore. Back in high school, we used to play this paper game where if you asked it a question answerable with yes, no, or question mark, it would oddly tell you the answer. Let me explain. It goes like this. Step 1. You cut out 3 small pieces of paper that you can write yes, no, and a question mark on. The question mark means that the thing, spirit, or entity you asked is not certain of the answer. You need to cut 6 pieces of tissue paper of equal size or bigger than the 3 pieces of paper. What is important is that the answer papers are covered. You now need to place the 3 rolled up papers between your fingers, 1 in each, starting from your forefinger and middle finger, kind of like when someone is holding a smoke, but placed closer to the palm if that makes sense. Do this for the other remaining 2 rolls until you reach the ring finger and the pinky finger. Step 4. Now place your palm to your chest where your heart is, palm facing down, and in your head ask your questions that can be answered by yes or no, while also chanting. Unfortunately, I can't remember the chant. You need to say it 3 times while you ask your question in your head. Step 5. After this, unravel the rolled paper and see the answer. You'll know this because the answer paper that used to be in the middle of the 3 layered rolls would be found in the innermost layer of the roll, meaning it would move magically to the inside of the roll. It would be the first thing you see when you unroll it. That is your answer. I remained fascinated by it and didn't question the hows or whys. I was more concerned with the answers I would get after asking whatever the thing answered me. And my classmates and best friend would be in their corner asking anything under the sun. I especially remember a classmate of mine having a breakdown because her 4-year relationship will not last according to the paper game. And yes, whatever answer you get comes true. I were jokingly asking out loud if our ever so strict teacher was not coming to class, knowing full well how impossible it can be, and got a yes answer. We laughed at it, saying, "This time around, you're so wrong." Only for our class president, who was attending a meeting among the student council, and was not there to hear anything regarding the question that was asked among my friend group. That and our cell phones are confiscated at the start of class until we go home. Our teacher would place the phones inside a glass jar where we could see if anyone is calling us so we can ask whoever the teacher is in our class for the key to open the jar. It's a whole thing. It only means that no one could have tipped off our class pres to say prank us. We asked all sort of questions and would get answers. Most would be small things, but some, like my classmate who is now in a better relationship, got their answer whether they liked it or not. And we even asked the paper if we were going to get into our chosen universities. And lo and behold, a few weeks in, we would get letters from said universities and would either get a no or yes as an answer, just like what the paper said. I got a yes and even graduated from that school. It bothers me looking back at it, and when I bring it up with my friends, they don't remember. But when I ask my cousin, who went to the same school but 3 years younger than me, remembers it. A friend from another section would tell me of his experience, much darker than I would like to know. He told me about a classmate they had who always kept to themselves and rarely interacted with them, and jokingly asked if that person was going to have a girlfriend. It gave him 2 answers, no and question mark. They did this a couple of times and kept getting the same answer, even if a different friend did it. Creeped out, they stopped the questioning and later on forgot about it. Life moved on. What's creepier? My uni is known for offering programs in the medical field, so it's only natural to have a hospital attached to it as it started as a hospital. And it was just after I became a university student, the topic of what our common friends were up to came up. He then brought up the classmate of his and what he had been doing. Solemnly he said that he was in jail for killing his girlfriend and son. Specifically, he had someone kill her and the boy, and they pretend to be internet installers, and they end up using a hammer to end them. And he solemnly said maybe that's why we kept getting 2 answers from the damn paper game. What was more chilling was the mother and son were brought to the ER of my uni before they expired from their injuries. I was not there when they came in, and even if I had, our professors would have not allowed us to see them. I was so shocked that it made national news. It was that gruesome. I personally never knew the guy. Thank the heavens for that, and didn't even connect the dots about him being a batch mate for my old high school. But I guess the paper game did and foresaw what was going to happen to that poor woman and son. What do you think? Did you play the paper game that answers your questions? Do you know any games just like this? A quick add-on. The person who allowed me to read this story also sent me articles as well about this story. But they aren't in English, just to give you guys a heads up. Their links are in the description box / show notes. As usual, the office staff entered the room without waiting for the floor to dry as soon as the janitor finished mopping the floor. "Does anyone else smell gasoline?" one of them asked right before the janitor threw a lit matchstick into the room from outside. Shadow Man by OdetteisDead. I've seen a few different things. Most commonly, I can just see a dog out the corner of my eyes, which are different breeds from the ones in which I own. The most vivid one was watching a shorter, stockier dog walk across my bedroom floor in front of my footboard. It was white with brown spots. At the time, we never owned a white dog. The house was built in 1926 for reference. This, however, was the first time seeing something like this. I was sitting in the living room doing some stuff on my laptop, when as I look up, since I saw something moving in my father's room, albeit he was taking a nap, I watched clear as day a tall man walk across one side of the room to the other. He had to be at least 7 feet tall. He had a cane, one more for the style rather than the physical needs. He wore a top hat and looked to be wearing a nice dress clothing, from what I could make out in the shapes. I had never seen anything like that. I got up and checked to see if anyone else was in the room, just to be sure I wasn't seeing things. No one else was in the room. It was only my father sleeping in his bed. The way the doors worked was they were old French doors. They were both open, displaying the room, which was originally intended to be the living room when it was built. The same room is also where I saw the full body of the dog walking on the floor down on the footboard. I feel as though that this room is the hot spot of everything I've encountered, though I have seen things going flying off shelves in my own. I've heard stories where a similar figure has been seen and some encounters have been dangerous, or he's been dangerous. Thoughts? Since she passed away, he only ever wished to see his daughter again. As her squealing corpse chewed through his jugular, the last 2 of the genie wishes suddenly felt like a threat. Strange Experience I Can't Get Out of My Mind by RDF69. I've had this paranormal experience that happened to me about 2 to 3 years ago. I've never been able to shake it out of my mind. I started thinking about it again today and wanted to get some insight on people who know a thing or two about the paranormal. So, now I'm here. I was at a PTO meeting at my old school. I was bored, and the only other kid there was an older girl that I'm not really friends with. So I decided to leave the cafeteria and wander around the school. Once I reached the second floor, I started walking down the hallway towards the library. Then I heard a voice, which sounded like a child's, coming from the library. It made a weird noise that went like... Really glad I was recording, so I captured that. I was a bit startled, but I was really curious as to what the noise could be. The library door was locked and the lights were off. No one was in there, and no one was even on the floor except for the janitor way down another hallway. I started to walk towards the library in curiosity. I then saw an all-white hand slap the window from the inside. Really mad my camera was on me, so I didn't get it on video. Does anyone have a clue what that thing in the library could have been? Side note, everyone used to say that the library was haunted. No one really saw anything, and you can't trust dumb and fooling around kids. But I did always have a weird feeling in that room, and was always looking around in paranoia. Also, a little side note for me, the weird audio in the middle of this is the one that the writer is talking about. I did up the sound so it was easier for you guys to hear as well. I don't want to play hide and go seek with my little brother anymore. It's been 3 years today and I can't find him anywhere. My Experiences with Bumps in the Night by Additional Help 2760. Hey y'all, I figured there would be a forum like this on Reddit. Glad I found it. I've had many experiences with orbs, ghosts, bumps, and interactions in my house. Here are the biggest. The first one is pretty cool in my opinion. Number 1. My wife is a childhood diabetic, and sometime at night her sugar levels will drop dangerously, which can put her into a coma. I'm a very light sleeper and have trouble sleeping in general, so one night at 2 a.m. I got up to watch TV, and as I walked past my wife, I looked at her and noticed 2 orbs around her head. One was bright yellow, and one was white/yellow. I looked, took a couple of more steps, and then went, what the hell? I backed up, and sure enough, the orbs were still around her head, so I went to check on my wife, and sure enough, she was profusely sweating, a sign of low sugar. We figured those orbs were her parents. Number 2. Another night I came back to bed and noticed an orb on my bed. I sat down and moved blankets around, lifting them up and stuff to see if it was a light trick, but the orbs just stayed there. I moved around, waved my hands, but the lights were never blocked. Then I heard a thump on the floor and noticed the orb was now at the base of our dresser, about the shoulder height of our dear cat, Winston, who passed away in 2007. I still miss him so much. We have often felt him jump on the bed or jump off. Number 3. And again, I was up watching hockey at about 4 a.m. when I noticed a black triangle zip across the screen against the white ice. Hey, there's a bird in the stadium, I thought, so I rewound the game. It was PBR. But no bird. The next night, I just climbed into bed when I felt 2 tugs on my blanket right by my shoulder, but I ignored it. The next night, as I lay in bed, I felt a heavy weight sit on the edge of the bed beside me. It scared the crap out of me. After that, he did not return, but my wife has a friend who can interact with spirits, and she said it was someone named Kevin. Number 4. This one I hate. I have a fan that has a safety feature. If you touch the fan shroud, it will stop the fan so the kids cannot be hurt. Suddenly, every night for a month, at 3 a.m.-ish, the fan would stop. And when it stopped, it makes a loud electric sound, a buzzing. The fan never stops at any other time except then. I always felt like there was someone standing in the corner watching me each night, and this freaked me out. So I moved the fan to an empty room, and guess what? It doesn't stop. If it stopped at random times, it was on from 10 p.m. to 9 a.m., I would say electrical problem. But every night around 3 a.m., it's strange. Number 5. This one just happened 2 nights ago. I was awakened laying in bed, and I could hear someone walking back and forth at the foot of the bed, and it was keeping me awake. Then I heard a tapping sound from our baseboard heater, then walking, then tapping. Well, this was too much, so I growled, "Will you fuck off? You're keeping me awake!" Right after I said this, there was a loud thump on the floor like I startled it, and the air in the room immediately became lighter. I have many more experiences, but these are the best. I guess I'm a bit tuned into the spirits. For number 3, I think I brought it in on myself. Knowing I'm a bit sensitive to spirits, I have been saying in my mind, if any spirits need help and you are a good spirit, I will try to help you. I guess Kevin needed help. A follow-up. Since I startled that spirit that night, I have had no experiences. The room has felt light. And this one goes with the creepy one. One night at bedtime, my wife and I had gotten to bed when we heard a hanger in our closet move. We both looked at each other. Then after the fan was turned off at 3 a.m.-ish, again, I sat up in bed, looked in the corner where the fan is, could sense someone/thing there, and said, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave this house and never return." A dark shadow went out my bedroom window, right beside the fan, and triggered the security light that is over our bedroom window as soon as it did. But I do think he came back, or someone else did anyway. They let my abuser out of prison early today. You think half a day at work would put him in a better mood, but less time torturing the inmates means more time torturing me. And now the stories have come to an end. If you're still awake, well, I hope you fall asleep shortly. And the sounds that you hear in the background are going to take center stage for no more than 30 minutes to help you fall asleep or stay asleep. But if you are awake and want to hear more stories, I do have playlists for that as well. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.